Hey, greetings, everybody. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. So looks page count wise, we're about 2/3 of the way through the book. In reality, we'll be 2/3 of the way through the book after this chapter. So we're cruising along. We just finished meeting Aviana. So yet another thing this guy gets to take credit for. But that one at least makes more sense. We've already introduced the demigods of Cenarius. We've established through chronicles that these demigods exist, and so why not have Aviana as well? All right, everybody, stay a while and listen to chapter 16. The Night Elven host met the demons again just beyond Suramar. The Burning Legion held them there for a short time, then fell back towards Zinajari. Midway through the next evening, the battle intensified, and once more no ground was gained or lost. Night Elves and demons perished horribly, either through the blade or the magic arts. Ravencrest could not stand this repeated stalemate, and so he had summoned Ronan and Illidan again. "Magic looks to be the deciding factor in this," he said to the human in particular. "Can you do anything?" Ronan considered. "There is something that may be possible, but I'll need the full cooperation of the Moonguard to put it into effect. It may backfire, too." "I doubt it can make anything worse. Well, Illidan." "I eagerly await to aid Master Ronan in whatever spell he crafts, my lord," Malfurion's twin said, with a bow to the wizard. Ronan kept his expression neutral. He hoped that Illidan would maintain control and not try to build on what the red-haired spellcaster planned. If he did, chaos might ensue. Chaos meant defeat. "We're going to draw upon the well as deeply as we can," Ronan informed Illidan as they made their way to the Moonguard. "I want to try something that the wizards of my homeland discussed doing, but were unable to try before things fell apart." "Will it be that complicated, Master Ronan?" "No, they spent weeks preparing it. But I have in here," he tapped his head, "all that they completed. It may take us a few hours, but we should be successful." Illidan grinned. "I have the utmost faith in you, Master Ronan." Again, the human wondered if the Night Elf would be able to follow orders without attempting to turn the spell into something of his own rash design. More and more, Illidan appeared unable to not be the center of any casting. He lived for his sorcery and cared not that much of his prowess had to do with the forces fed into him by the Moonguard. By the gods, Ronan thought suddenly, he almost sounds like a demon that way. Ooh, a little foreshadowing again. But in so many other ways, the Ember-Eyed Night Elf was a potentially more terrible threat. An Illidan who sought to dominate, there indeed was a path to destruction. I'll keep him under control. I have to with Krasis gone. He could only hope that his former mentor had succeeded in reaching the dragons. If not, Ronan did not know what might happen. He had not planned on utilizing such a very dangerous spell, but with the knowledge that the outcome of this war was anything but set, there seemed no other choice. Not wanting to leave the soldiers defenseless against the warlock's dark magic, Ronan had Illidan pick out a dozen of the best from the sorcerer's ranks and left the rest to see to the battle. He would only need them once he had the spell ready to cast. The Moonguard would amplify it, spread it where he needed it to go, but only if Ronan succeeded with his part. "Illidan, I need you to guide me," the wizard said when everything else was prepared. "I need you to bring me to the well itself." "Yes, Master Ronan." The Night Elf eagerly stood next to him as they prepared to reach out with their minds to the source of all Night Elven magic. Up until this point, Ronan had been touching peripherally on the power of the well. Unlike Illidan's people, he had not needed to rely on direct use, which gave him a very distinct advantage. Illidan and a few others had learned from the human how to do this, but not to the same degree. Now, however, Ronan needed to draw as much as he could so that he could be guaranteed of the results he desired. Far away, a horn sounded. Lord Ravencrest was setting up everything in preparation for Ronan's grand spell or grand catastrophe. Standing side by side, the two spellcasters reached out with their thoughts and linked. Ronan felt Illidan's wild nature and tried to keep it in check. The Night Elf's zealousness was a definite threat to the stability of the spell. Illidan's mind drew the wizard forward. Through his inner eye, Ronan watched the landscape rip past as he and his companions sought to touch the well. Endless rows of demons, followed by miles of ravaged landscape, passed within a single second. Briefly, the ruined city of Zinajari rose up, then filled his gaze. The grand palace of Queen Ajara dominated next, and finally the black waters of the Well of Eternity greeted the human. Its power staggered him. Ronan had always assumed that he had sensed the well enough simply by drawing upon that part of it which permeated all Kalimdor. Now he realized he had been mistaken, that the well itself was such a fount of pure energy that if he could command it all, he felt it would make of him a god. A god. Everything that Ronan had dreamed of when first he had taken up the robes of wizardry now seemed so simple. He could raise up entire cities, or tear them down with the blink of an eye. He could call up the power of the earth, then send it crashing down on any who opposed him. He could... With tremendous effort, Ronan freed himself of his dark ambitions. A sudden anxiety filled him as he recognized the well. He had known what it was all along, and yet his mind had denied the evil. It had the same taint as the demons. Pure magic it might be, but in its way it corrupted as much as Sargeras did. But it was too late to turn back. Ronan had to delve into the well this once, then never touch it in such a manner again. Even drawing upon it as he had in the past now repulsed him. But to give it up completely meant that he would have to give up all magic, and Ronan knew he was too weak of soul to ever do that much. Sensing Illidan's impatience and curiosity, the wizard quickly took up the power he needed from the dark depths. The temptation to let it all engulf his mind proved daunting, but with effort he retreated from the cursed waters. Within moments, the minds of the Night Elf and him had returned to their bodies. The link to the well remained as strong as ever. Ronan prepared to cast, knowing that the sooner he did, the sooner he could be rid of the foul sensation in his soul. It begins now, he told Illidan. Instantly he felt Malfurion's twin prepare the moon guard for the task. What the wizard fed them then would send out toward the enemy, multiplying its intensity more than 100-fold. With ease, Ronan constructed the spell matrix that his masters in Dalaran had died working on. He briefly thanked their departed souls, regardless of the fact that none of the wizards would be born for centuries to come. Then, when Ronan was satisfied that the matrix would remain stable, the wizard unleashed the spell. Illidan and the others mentally shook as it reverberated through their systems. To his credit, the young sorcerer kept the much more practiced spellcasters from buckling. The very ambition that Ronan feared now kept his plans together, and so they struck at the demon's lines. A ripple of ear-shattering sound hit the burning legion without even touching the soldiers, who frantically battled them. Massive demons shrieked and dropped their weapons as they tried to shut the sound out. The vibration shattered their insides, tore apart their minds. As the wave raced over their forces, the demons fell as if swept by some giant broom. All across the front they perished. The soldiers stood frozen, shaken up by what they witnessed. "Now, Ravencrest," Ronan whispered. "Now." The horns sounded, urging a rapid advance. The Night Elves shouted. Panther Riders led the way. They charged across the field seeking the enemy, but ahead of them lay only the dead. The sound wave continued to race on, cutting a swath of swift but violent death. No demon caught in its path lived. Hundreds perished. Ronan suddenly felt his body give up on him. He wobbled, his head feeling as if like the demons would explode. The wizard fell. "I have you, Master Ronan." Illidan eased him to the ground, the Night Elf none the worse for the wear. He was in fact the only one. The rest of the moon guard involved in the grand spell looked as terrible as the wizard felt. Most of them sat or even fell down, not at all caring that the soldiers now advanced from them. "Did you see it? Did you see what we did?" demanded Illidan eagerly. "This proves it. There's no power like the well." He glanced at something or someone whom Ronan himself could not see. "The well is this way, brother, you see? Nothing else compares." He continued shouting to an absent Malfurion. Ronan, still seeking to regain his strength, could only stare. Illidan's avarice, his jealousy, was so apparent that it almost bordered on hatred for the druid. Ronan's spell had sent the demons into flight, possibly turned the tide of the war forever, but as he watched Illidan's intense expression and thought of his own near seduction by the well, the wizard wondered if he had just unleashed something more terrible on the Night Elf race. Korialstrasz brooded, his patience growing very thin. The dragons had all been ordered to await the word of the aspects. When that came, every flight would take to the air as if of one mind, one soul. The plan was to descend upon the demons as a terrifying force, the dragon soul ripping apart the demon lines before the leviathans themselves struck. A simple, workable plan, a faultless plan. A plan that, for reasons he could not express even to himself, Korialstrasz did not trust. But the male red was loyal to his queen, his mate, and so he did nothing. Alexstrasza trusted in Eltharion's creation, more to the point she trusted in the Earth Warder himself. Whatever uncertainties Korialstrasz had, they had to remain unspoken. Ever the thinker, my love. Ever the warrior. He raised his head in surprise as the gigantic female entered his lair. Alexstrasza, he rumbled, you are to be with the other aspects. I have made excuses for my momentary absence. Eltharion is not pleased, but he will have to control himself. Korialstrasz lowered his head in homage to her. How may I be of service to you, my queen? A hint of indecision glinted in her eyes. In a voice so very quiet for a dragon, she replied, I need you to disobey me. Her consort was perplexed. My love? All save the sentinels that each of us posted are supposed to remain in this, the vastest of the cavern systems, until the moment of the launch. I wish you to ignore my earlier command and leave. He was stunned. Clearly the other aspects were not to know of his departure. And where am I to go? I don't know precisely, but I hope that you'll be able to sense exactly where, once you're beyond the barrier. I want you to find Krasis. Krasis. The mysterious mage had been much on the mind of Korialstrasz too. Krasis likely knew things that would have cleared up much that disturbed the consort. He should still be with the Night Elves. No, he was near us only a short time ago. Ysera told me that a Night Elf called Malfurion sought to act as his messenger through her. However, she distrusted such an action, and so made the Night Elf wait until the moment was right. And when Ysera sought for Malfurion again, he had vanished. She told me all this while Neltharion and Malygos discussed the spellwork of the soul. But why would Krasis come here? The anxieties felt by the male red multiplied. The journey from the lands of the Night Elves was quite a distance for one who could not fly several miles in the space of a few minutes. That is what I want to know. I'll do my best to find him, but it may prove harder than you imagined. The queen snorted. She shut her eyes and thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, you must know now. Know what? My love, you felt the closeness between you and Krasis. You would almost describe him as a clutch brother, wouldn't you? He had not thought so before, but now that Alexstrasza said it, Korialstrasz realized that yes, Krasis did hold such an esteemed place in his heart. It had nothing to do with the scales they had shared to overcome their weakness. Something about the mysterious figure had made the consort come to trust him as much as he did his glorious mate, and at times even more so. Alexstrasza read his face. Know this, my love. The reason you and Krasis are so close is that he and you are one and the same. The male red blinked. Surely he had heard wrong. Surely Alexstrasza meant something else. But she shook her massive head, stating, Krasis is you, Korialstrasz. He is you much older, much more learned, much wiser. He is you countless centuries forward. That is impossible, a sudden thought occurred to him. Is this some trick of Nosdormu? His absence has been very questionable. Nosdormu has some part in this, yes, but I can't tell you exactly how. Just understand that Krasis is here because he must be. Then the outcome of the war is assured. The dragon soul will help us triumph over the demons. My concerns were for naught. Your concerns are valid. We don't know anything about the outcome. Krasis fears that Nosdormu has sent him here because the timeline has shifted. There was a point where I had to consider eliminating him and his companion in order to preserve it, but it soon became evident that matters had gone beyond such. Korialstrasz gazed at her with wide, wondering orbs. You would have slain me? At his insistence, my love. He mulled that over and saw her reasoning. Forgive me. Yes, my queen, I'll go searching for him. I thank you. His memories were much damaged by the journey to our time, perhaps because he already existed here as you. Still, he is sharp of wit in most ways, and if there is something he urgently needed to discuss, then it behooves us to find him. I go immediately. Alexstrasza dipped her head in gratitude. I must pretend that you do this by your own leave, Korialstrasz. Of course, I won't fail you, my queen. She gave him a most loving look, then departed his lair. The male waited just long enough for her to be nowhere near, then left too. To his relief, it proved not at all difficult to leave the mountain itself, for most of the dragons now sat poised, awaiting the command to fly. The few others were like himself or Tyron, consorts with positions of leadership who had to be near if the aspects needed them. Evading the sentinels beyond was slightly more troublesome. The first of his own flight managed to evade by being aware of the other's personality traits. Korialstrasz was a young, eagle-eyed male, but he had a tendency to become distracted. As Korialstrasz came upon him, the bored guardian had begun batting large rocks into the air with his tail, then watching them plummet to the ground far below. As he hit the next, Korialstrasz soared over him, flying high enough that the other red would not sense the shift in the air currents. By one means or another, he passed the rest undiscovered. As he flew toward the barrier, Korialstrasz prepared himself for contact. He struck the invisible wall head-on, feeling as if he pushed through molasses. Wings flapping as hard as possible, the dragon burst to the other side, soaring miles beyond before he managed to regain proper control. Perching on a squat mountain, Korialstrasz quickly imagined Krasis. For good measure, he touched with one claw the scale that his older self had traded to him. So much made more sense now. He had wondered why the exchange should aid the pair so well. By doing so, the two halves of himself had become more complete. Korialstrasz had still suffered some pain and weariness, but nowhere near what he had before that event. He put all his concentration into finding Krasis, seeking that link that only two who were one could possibly have. The dragon doubted that his other half was still near, for if it had been him, and it was, Korialstrasz would have continued seeking some way to enter. He would not have gone into hiding. Therefore, circumstances had demanded that Krasis flee. Trying not to think of just what might have forced his elder form to abandon the area of the barrier, the red reached out. Only a dragon's will could encompass the expanse that Korialstrasz's did now. Over countless lands his mind stretched, hunting that which was him, but his patience soon frayed as nowhere did he sense himself. It should have been a relatively simple task. Had some dire fate befallen Krasis? The very thought sent shivers through Korialstrasz. No creature yearned to discover his ultimate fate. But then, as if abruptly reborn, the dragon sensed the familiar presence. He could not detect the exact location, but knew which direction he should at least fly. Korialstrasz immediately launched into the air, flapping as hard as he could. The sooner he retrieved his other self, the sooner he could feel secure once more. Krasis became his utter focus. His surroundings blurred. With his huge wings, he ate away at the miles, but even still, he felt it much too slow. So obsessed, Korialstrasz did not know that he was under attack until the claws tore into his back. With a startled roar, he rolled in the air, taking his attacker by surprise. The monstrous visage of a black dragon filled his gaze. "Stop!" the red shouted. "By the glory of the aspects, I demand that you—" In response, the other dragon opened his mouth. Korialstrasz ceased flapping, his huge body immediately dropping like a stone. It was the only thing that saved him from a fearsome burst of molten flame. The searing heat shot just past his head, making his eyes tear. Pain racked Korialstrasz where the other's claws had torn through scale. Although slightly larger than the black, Korialstrasz's inherent weakness more than even the battle. "Leave me be," he said, trying again to use reason. "There is no need for confrontation between us." "You will not interfere," the black retorted, eyes wide and surely mad. Alexstras's consort had no idea what his adversary meant by that, but it strengthened the fear that something had happened to Krasis. The ebony behemoth dropped down on Korialstrasz, forcing him in turn to descend further. Korialstrasz allowed it to happen, intending to spin out from under his foe at the last moment. But as he neared the mountaintops, he discovered that he had been played for a fool. Korialstrasz's adversary suddenly released his hold. As he did, another black dragon leapt from behind a nearby peak. It collided with the red, sending both spinning out of control. The jagged earth below rushed up toward the pair. "You'll slay us both," shouted Korialstrasz, "for the glory of my master." The rushing wind forced back the black's wings. Only then did Alexstras's consort see that one had been broken and torn. This dragon could no longer fly properly. He intended to sacrifice himself in order to send his foe to his death. Korialstrasz, however, had no intention of perishing so. Beating his wings hard, he did what the other was incapable of doing, using the leathery appendages to direct their fall. Suddenly, instead of the red being on the bottom, the sinister black found himself there. The injured giant roared and tried to flip them back over. farther up, an answering cry warned Korialstrasz that his other foe had realized what was happening. Pulling in all four legs but keeping his grip, the Red calculated the seconds remaining. He watched the harsh landscape near, his attention in particular on the short, sharp hills mixed among the mountains. And as he and the Black reached them, Korialstrasz stretched his legs, thrusting his adversary down, even as he beat his wings hard to lift his own considerable mass. With a painful howl that echoed throughout the region, the injured Black collided with the ground. His bones shattered, and he briefly flailed like a leaf caught in a breeze. Blood spilled over the immediate area. A final gasp escaped the stricken Leviathan, and then his head rolled to the side, his tongue lolling free. The second attack nearly caught Korialstrasz as he struggled to keep from joining the dead dragon. Again the claws raked the Red's back, forcing a cry from him. The strain of the battle began to tell on Korialstrasz. His breathing grew weary, and it took increasing effort to keep aloft. Neither he nor Alexstrasza had expected this betrayal by Neltharion's flight. "You must die!" roared the Black wildly, as if by telling his prey this, Korialstrasz would understand. The Red Dragon managed to avoid the deadly talons again, but his foe pressed him hard. The other behemoth was not only swift, but driven by a manic desire to please the Earth Warder. Like the first Black, he appeared ready to sacrifice himself if it would serve the cause. But what cause? Why be so furious that one dragon was not among the rest? Why had fear of that very fact caused Neltharion to command these to die for him? Whatever the reason, Korialstrasz could no longer worry about it. A fierce column of molten fire caught him full in the chest. He spun around madly, unable to focus. Claws dug into his chest. The fetid breath of the Black nearly caused him to gag. "I have you!" roared the insane creature. The dark giant inhaled for another blast, once certain to slay his opponent at such close range. Desperate, Korialstrasz thrust his head forward. His huge jaws clamped tight on the Black's neck, squeezing so hard that it cut off the air passage. The other dragon shook violently as the forces it sought to unleash could not find an exit. He clawed frantically at Korialstrasz, leaving scars in the face and body. The Black literally exploded. Releasing the neck, Korialstrasz roared in agony as burning ichor poured over him from the ruined corpse. It was too much. His strength gone, he and his dead adversary dropped to the earth. And as he blacked out, the Red Dragon could only wonder how his death would affect his future self. I would imagine pretty badly. Yeah, that's where things are weird. Like, that made his future self blink out. Would everything that had happened so far even happen? It's time travel for you. You gotta avoid it by just not creating domino chains like that. I mean, yeah, like the death of a car itself is a big one. All right, so yeah, not a lot. I mean, this chapter really just is, hey, Illidan further continues into his madness, and we have Krasis like, all right, I'm going to leave. Not Krasis, Korialstrasz to rejoin them. And the only thing I was really noting here is that it seemed from 10,000 years before the war, the Black Dragonflight, the Onyx Dragonflight is the bad. They've been bad the whole time. I'm trying to think where they're at in, I don't know. Like I said before, I believe it's red dragons that are in the Warcraft series, like Warcraft 1 and 2, or at least 2. I don't know that they're even in 1. Again, yeah, I never played Warcraft 3. I'm very eager to do that with you guys. You're going to get all my first-hand reactions. It's that game I've literally never played. And then I'll jump over to this one. Okay, another episode in the pipes, 5x5. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.